Running back time. Running back time. All right. When it comes to running backs, elite tier of running backs this week is defined by people that I think could finish as the running back one for the week. So I think this is the elite high end to mid tier RB1s. These are players I would start no matter the situation. Like, even if you're in an 8-team league, you're starting all these backs. There's almost no chance you have 3 of these guys. So the first one, obviously, Bijan at Pittsburgh. I think that's a great start there. Saquon at Bijan at home against Pittsburgh. Saquon Barkley at home against Green Bay. Christian McCaffrey against the Jets at home. Jonathan Taylor at home against Houston. And Jahmyr Gibbs at home against the Rams. Breece Hall on the road against San Francisco. Any surprise there? These are the top 6 picks in redraft at the running back position. They all fit in this first tier. And I think you can flip-flop these a lot of different ways. And I could probably make cases for any back that I just said, right? But when it comes to Bijan Robinson, obviously, I think this is going to be one of those games where we see him get featured. And it's a decent matchup against Pittsburgh where they'll have to move the ball on the ground. Saquon Barkley, same thing. I think when you get new toys, a lot of times you want to see how they play. And I think for Zach Robinson and then for Kellen Moore there in Philly, we're going to get to see the most out of Bijan and Saquon Barkley. Christian McCaffrey coming back from the calf, so I'm a little concerned about his management more so than like them just giving him 20 to 25 touches against a very tough Jets defense. So I know it's the first game of the year. A lot of people are going to be expecting Christian McCaffrey to be the #1 running back this week. Monday Night Football, I'd err on the side of caution. He's still an RB1, but I think I would err on the side of caution if it came to him, Bijan, Saquon. And then as far as the rest of this tier, there's 2 more in the rest of this tier. Travis Etienne to me in a shootout, potential shootout, Jacksonville, Miami. I can see Travis Etienne having a big day as well. A lot of the concerns I had with him were second half concerns as the season wears down. For now and in the start of seasons, we've seen Travis Etienne have very strong starts. I think that continues. And then at the number 8 spot is Alvin Kamara going up against the Carolina defense that if they had a vulnerability to be in the middle, the secondary is really good. The defense overall is really good. But this offensive line's beat up. And I think we're going to see some checkdowns, some featured usage from Kubiak with Alvin Kamara. So that kind of rounds out the first tier that I have here, full of the elite names. Most of these guys, outside of Alvin Kamara, all these guys were being drafted top 10 in ADP. Top 10 in ADP. In the next tier, I got Joe Mixon at Indy. Think he's going to be a solid play here. Only concern with him is that he's coming back from a mild injury as well. Need to see what that looks like. Rachaad White against Washington. Think this is a good play for him. And I have no issues with Rachaad White. I think this is a player that if I know he's going to get similar usage, I know it's a different offense, but if he gets similar usage to last year, we probably have Rachaad White too low. If Rachaad White has new usage and they do mix in Bucky Irving, then I'm probably a little too high on Rachaad White. I'm going to leave him here at kind of a neutral tier because I think he can produce. James Cook against Arizona should have a phenomenal day. I'm not a big James Cook guy, but going up against Arizona, they're going to use their running back, especially if they get up in this game at all. Kyron Williams has a very tough matchup against a stout defensive front in the Detroit Lions, so he's here in this middle tier. Kenneth Walker against Denver. I like the upside there. I almost, those two are I could flip-flop them at any given point in time. I like the upside a little bit more for Kenneth Walker. Derrick Henry against KC, Isaiah Pacheco against Baltimore. All these guys are tier 2 guys. I don't really have a preference if you want to shift them around a little bit. Some of them have better upside. Some of them have better floor, okay? So that's the tier 2. That Pacheco-Derrick Henry thing is going to be interesting to me because I think Derrick Henry is a touchdown or bust kind of play, but he's got a lot. He's faced KC a couple times, and I know that he's got get back on his mind. Isaiah Pacheco has gone early in drafts as a RB1. He's down here like the mid-tier RB2 range to me. And notably, Andy Reid has been slower to use his running backs like early and often. He normally works all 3 of them in to start the season. Like you normally see Andy Reid. We've seen this now for a couple years. First week where Andy Reid will mix in his running backs. He did it last year against Detroit. Wouldn't be surprised to see him do it again against Baltimore, where we get a mixture of Pirine and then also Carson. I can't remember kid's name. Carson. Why can't I think of his name right now off the top of my head? Anyway, that's where I'm at with them. Why can't that's gonna piss me off? Let me get it right now. Carson Steele. I was trying to say I had Carson Strong in my name the entire time. So Carson Steele. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of these guys get mixed in. A couple of these guys get mixed in. And then as far as the next tier, I think there's another clear teardrop. Josh Jacobs could probably go in this tier too, but I think Philly, this defensive line for Philly is very stout. This obviously this front. I'm sure he'll be involved in the passing game. I just think the ceiling's a little bit lower than like an RB1, whereas some of the guys in tier 2 had a little bit more ceiling. So Josh Jacobs probably is a good floor play. Devon Achane versus Jacksonville. James Conner at Buffalo. Aaron Jones at New York. Ramondre Stevenson at Cincinnati. Raheem Mostert versus Jacksonville. So as you'll see, I have Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert both in this tier, where I think Devon Achane is going to be more the pass catching back this year. I think a lot of people are expecting like 20 to 25 touches. He's the starter. I don't see it that way. I think he's going to be more of a pass catching back in this role. Raheem Mostert's still going to get his 12 to 15 carries and red zone usage. Well, let's see how it plays out. But for now, I have them closer to each other than their summer-long ADP. A couple of running backs with more difficult matchups, I'll say. So Josh Jacobs, obviously. James Conner has kind of a stout matchup there against Buffalo. Both of those guys should be workhorses for their teams, but I'm kind of downgrading them a little bit just because of the matchups. And then when it comes to the back end of this tier 3, Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, Najee Harris, and Javonte Williams are all in there. I could have thrown Zamir White. He was the next player that I could have been in this tier, but I have him right below this tier. When it comes to Tony Pollard, I think this is a player that, the timeshare is a concern, right? Is it Tajay Spears? Is it Tony Pollard? And this is me banking on the fact that I think Tony Pollard is the 1A in this situation and probably have first crack at red zone usage as well and a starting role. So when it comes to Tony Pollard, if we're taking this, at face value, I think it's a good matchup on paper for him, even though this Bears defense should be improved, should have some really good improvements, actually. I still think Tony Pollard should have a decent day on the ground. And then as far as Najee, a lot of people obviously are down on Najee Harris because of his past. I don't have him highly ranked even for this week. He's a RB, he's in the RB2, RB3 range for me, depending on your league size. But Najee Harris is a player that, Arthur Smith's probably going to utilize a lot more than we're thinking. So Jaylen Warren being banged up, we could see Najee Harris with the 15 to 20 touch day. That should be the standard for him moving forward. But how's his involvement in the passing game? And against this improved Atlanta defense, want to see where he's at. Javonte should have a strong day against Seattle as well. As far as tier 4. So this is the next tier. This is your RB3s, like rock solid RB3s. I got Zamir White against the Chargers in this tier, DeAndre Swift against Tennessee, Jerome Ford against Dallas, Devin Singletary against Minnesota, Gus Edwards against the Raiders, Brian Robinson against the Commanders, Zach Moss against the Patriots, Chuba Hubbard against New Orleans, and Tajay Spears at Chicago. So in this tier, these are like your rock solid flex RB3s. If you got a couple of the guys ahead of them, like these are probably fringe bench players in 10-team leagues, bench players for sure in 8-team leagues. I think the one name that's down here that probably is shocking people is Zamir White. You drafted him as a top 20 to 25 running back, and I have him outside the top 25 here for this week. But we don't know what this looks like as far as if it is a committee. There's been talks that Zamir White is in a committee with Alexander Mattison. I don't see it that way. But in a matchup against the Chargers, I want to see how they utilize him, especially they're underdogs in this game. So there's a chance they may be playing from behind. I want to see what Zamir White looks like this week before I start comfortably trusting him as we did towards the end of last season. Another name that's down here that might shock people is DeAndre Swift. Another committee potential here with him now. DeAndre Swift, we've seen him look great behind the Philly offensive line, but he still finishes the RB20 last year. So a strong start and some bad finishes, right? So a bad finish to the season. So we got to see what DeAndre Swift looks like behind this offensive line, and with Caleb Williams probably passing a little bit more to start. I think he's gonna be passing a little bit more to try to work the kinks out starting the season. So I got DeAndre Swift a little bit lower than most people probably have him. For me, he's in this tier. Couple names that I do like that I think are undervalued in the RB space, I would say Gus Edwards, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss. All three of these backs are in this tier as well. These are more floor plays. I think Devin Singletary offers more upside, but Zach Moss and Gus Edwards probably profile as need a touchdown to be more than 10 points, 20 carries for 80 yards, those type of backs. So I think Gus Edwards and Zach Moss, both these guys are 15 to 20 carries initially early on, 60 to 80 yards. Will need a touchdown in order to justify their value, but that's why they're here in this tier. Why is David Montgomery so low? So Monty was in my top 25. I don't think that's low for him, but he is a backup to Jahmyr Gibbs. And against the Rams, maybe he sees a touchdown, but he also needs a touchdown to have his value for the most part. So Jahmyr Gibbs expected to take on a bigger role in the passing game, a bigger role in general. David Montgomery is going to be the one who is hurt the most by that. So if he scores a touchdown, I think he'll be great, 15 points. If he doesn't score a touchdown, I think he'll be a little disappointing for the week. As far as the fifth tier goes, Chase Brown, Jaylen Warren. Chase Brown against New England, Jaylen Warren against Atlanta, Austin Eckler against Tampa Bay, Ezekiel Elliott against Cleveland, Rico Dowdle against Cleveland. Now, here I got the pass-catching backs, right? The Chase Brown, Jaylen Warren, Eckler. These guys could produce RB, but I think they're more RB3 flex, especially Jaylen Warren, who's coming off of the injury, right? Chase Brown, we know he's going to be the pass catcher. We know he's going to be part of the committee, but how much is he used in the red zone? And how many touches does that look like, right? He's listed as number 2 on the depth chart. I know depth chart really doesn't matter until we see a few games, but I want to see how he was used because there was a lot of hype about him this offseason, about Chase Brown. So I got him here in this fifth tier right here alongside Jaylen Warren, who is coming back from his injury as well. So I expect limited touches for Jaylen Warren coming back. Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler is the name that's in this tier that I might have a little too low. I think I should have him closer to Brian Robinson and probably in the same tier there. But the reason I have Eckler down here is because he needs to prove it. He needs to prove that he's not washed. Everybody says he's washed. He needs to prove that he has the speed. He needs to prove that he's part of this offense and that he signed with Washington for a reason, and that's to be a flex-type player for our fantasy teams. That's why he signed in Washington, so he can help out our fantasy teams, right? But I want to see him in a pass-catching role. I want to see what his red zone usage looks like and how they split these backs. Is it a true 50-50 split? Is Brian Robinson the lead? Is Eckler a complementary piece? Is Eckler the piece that's being used in this air raid offense? So I am watching Eckler very closely, but I think he has risk. I have him as an RB5. And then the last spots in this one were Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle. And for me, both of those guys, we just got to see the split against a tough Cleveland defense. It's going to be hard to even see that. Like Zeke profiles as a touchdown or bust guy. Rico profiles is like, probably going to be between the 20s and maybe has a little bit more important role, but probably not the ceiling that we want to see until a little bit later in the year when he's, kind of outpaced Ezekiel Elliott and become the starter. So that's how I have it, Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle. In the 6th and 7th tier are full of just backup running backs. Most of these guys were not starting. Zach Charbonnet, Antonio Gibson, Tyler Algier, Ty Chandler, Jaleel McLaughlin, J.K. Dobbins, Justice Hill, Jalen Wright, Blake Corum, Trey Benson, Khalil Herbert, Miles Sanders, Jamal Williams, Madison, Roshan Johnson, Ray Davis, Tank Bigsby. Left off Braylon Allen on here. There's a couple other names I probably haven't said, but you're not starting these guys in most leagues. Most of these guys don't offer anything more than like 5-point upside. All right, so there's the running backs. Let me know what you guys thought about the running backs. Let me know what you thought about the running backs.